think there were big chunks missing out of my medical school education that I think functional medicine was able to fill in and give me words to describe.
One concept that was never brought up in my medical school was a concept that's being referred to now is the total toxic load, right? In conventional toxicology, they look for a connection between one chemical or one metal and a disease. So, we're talking about multiple sclerosis today, right? So you might look for papers that say, is there a particular chemical that's associated with multiple sclerosis? And actually there's some studies on solvents in particular showing that certain solvents can predispose you. But in conventional toxicology, the focus is always on what does this one chemical do? And so let's take laboratory animals and let's bombard them with this chemical. Let's, put benzene in their drinking water and see if they get cancer or MS or something like that. But they never ask the question, well, what happens if you take the benzene and you mix it with a little mercury? And you mix that with a little cadmium and you mix that with PFAS, which are everywhere in our environment, and you mix that with microplastics. And what if that laboratory animal has got a vitamin D deficiency? Oh, well, what if that laboratory animal isn't eating enough? That rat's not eating enough salmon.
Right. I mean, you've just described what happens in an ordinary human being, right? We're not exposed to one toxin. We are exposed to thousands of toxins. Nobody tests clean and they interact, right?
Right. And so what happens if you've got an individual that for some reason, let's just say genetics was the start of it, that their liver just doesn't get rid of toxins very well. So we're not just talking about one toxin. We're talking about whole families of toxins. A typical person has detectable levels of at least 1,000 different chemicals in their bloodstream and their body fat, et cetera. So what if a person genetically is unable to get rid of these things? And we get rid of them by attaching certain chemicals to the toxin. So if it's a fat soluble toxin and we don't do anything to it, it'll end up in our fat, right? It'll end up in our brain, our kidneys, our body fat. If it's water soluble, eventually you'll pee it out, but it may cause harm along the way anyhow. So what if you have a person, again, that can't process the toxins very well? And then they also have, as I said, a vitamin D deficiency, right? That's not looked at in conventional toxicology, but it's something we talk about in functional medicine all the time. So I might measure a person's capability of eliminating toxins. I might look at their diet to see if they're eating foods that will help them eliminate toxins, like broccoli, which that I like broccoli. So
oh yeah,
come back and talk about,
with turmeric.
Broccoli and turmeric. Yeah. So what if the person's not eating those foods? What if they're nutritionally inadequate? And there are many published research studies in medical journals that show that if people are undernourished, right, if they're not getting the right kind of nutrients, if they eat ultra-processed foods, then that interferes with their ability to lower their total toxic load. So total toxic load simply refers to the combination of all the different things that maybe their own body is making, right? The gut bacteria, they make toxins. So what about what we're exposed to in the workplace or in our environment? What if you have a gas stove? Which I have a gas stove in my cabin up in the mountains. I love it, right? It cooks great. And it's terrific when the power goes out.
Yep.
But more and more with new studies coming out about gas stoves, I'm kind of scratching my head and looking at it going, really? What am I going to do here?
Yeah, I know. That's getting phased out here in California real quick.
They're going fast. But, at the same time, if you live in a place, like my place up in the mountains, power can go out for 3 or 4 days. If you don't have a gas stove, you ain't eating.
Yep, absolutely. So what you're getting at is we're all exposed, even at minuscule amounts, these compounds can interact with each other and create a much bigger, badder problem than just one toxin by itself. We don't study that.
We don't
In
study it
conventional
in medical
toxin.
school, but it is being studied. It's not like it's not happening. In one place, I'll point out for people who want to track this, Stanford.
Oh, I
And
know
yeah,
Stanford.
yes, you know about Stanford. The research that's going on there right now on what's called the exposome is groundbreaking. And what they're having people do is walk around with these little devices that basically sample the air the person's breathing, and then they take regular stool samples and blood samples, uh, and then put all that together and say, okay, over the course of a year, what's this individual exposed to? And they found even people that live together have slightly different exposures. So this research on what's called the exposome, which is everything we're exposed to, this is groundbreaking. This is going to change the nature of science, because if Stanford says this is cool to look at, then other medical schools are not going to be able to ignore it.
It's important. I mean, it's been hard to study the impact of toxins, but we're getting there. And there's enough information for us to act, because we know that toxins can interrupt the immune system, the gut microbiome can be damaging to the gut. And I love how you went straight to like broccoli
Yeah.
and not like some expensive supplement. So real quick, what can we do to leverage detox to help improve immune health?
Okay. So there's this pathway, and this is technical, so I'm going to get it. It's called the NRF2 pathway, the NRF2. And I can't tell you exactly what NRF2 stands for. I've memorized it more than one time, right? Um, and it's interesting because we knew for years that people that ate a lot of broccoli and other vegetables in that family, the brassica family, we knew that people that ate them seemed to have less cancer, right? So, the original concept was people who eat more fruits and vegetables have less cancer. But then they started narrowing it down, saying, well, it's not all fruits and it's not all vegetables. And hey, brassica vegetables in particular seem to have a particularly potent effect. And then researchers at Johns Hopkins said, well, what exactly are they doing? And it turns out there's a family of chemicals that are in brassica vegetables, and these chemicals are called glucosinolates. And why are they there? Because the plant makes them as pesticides. So if you take a chunk out of broccoli, it immediately gives you this kind of bitter flavor. Same thing with raw cabbage. You get a bitter flavor. That's because when you bite into the vegetable, it liberates an enzyme called myrosinase, and that enzyme converts this chemical, the glucosinolate, into something like sulforaphane, what's called isothiocyanate. Again, I'm going to leave the technical stuff behind, but you'll see why I'm emphasizing this in a minute. So at Johns Hopkins, they discovered all these pathways. Wow, when you eat broccoli, you get this chemical called sulforaphane, and it activates a pathway called NRF2. And NRF2 turns on DNA to make all kinds of protective proteins. And those protective proteins include enzymes that lower the toxic load. How do they know this? Because they did a study in, I think it was the Yangtze River in China, which is a pretty polluted area. So the researchers at Hopkins found out the most potent source of these chemicals is broccoli sprouts, right? So you want the most bang for your buck, broccoli sprouts. They took the broccoli sprouts and they made a drink out of them. And they had people in the Yangtze River Valley drink the broccoli sprout juice. And it's funny, I saw a picture from a presentation by Dr. Jed Fahey, who did this research. And he said, and it's a great tasting drink. And this person is just making the worst face possible when they're, like, so, and it tastes great. Well, actually, I love broccoli sprouts. I eat them several times a week. They don't taste bad at all, but when you put them in a blender and you make a drink, it's got that bitter flavor to it, right? So they had people drink this stuff, and then they measured toxins in their urine. Within 24 hours, the toxins in their urine that were being excreted went up dramatically. And as long as they continued to drink the drink, which was good for them, like how are they compliant with this for, I mean, like 6 weeks or so, and they kept peeing out the toxins. So this is pretty profound. Well, what does it have to do with MS? One of the more popular drugs for MS right now is called Tecfidera. And it's part of a family of drugs called fumarates, right? What's their mechanism of action? They activate NRF2.
There you go.
There you go. So I go, well, wait a minute. If you want to, if your goal is to activate NRF2, how about if you ate broccoli sprouts every day
Yep.
or healthy coleslaw?
So, I mean, it goes to show that food is powerful. It works with your body. It can really promote these detoxification pathways, turn on antioxidant genes, turn down inflammation. You just got to start getting those foods in, and
Yeah,
we always talk about a whole foods, plant-based diet. So,
your
detox,
nine servings,
what's that? Say that
your
again.
nine servings of fruits and vegetables. Our friend Terry Walls, that basically piles it high on the plate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she gets in massive amounts. So, detox isn't a buzzword. It's not a fad. It's actually built into your body. And without detox in place, you actually wouldn't survive for very long. And so here are just a couple of things you can do, right? Like eating plant-based foods, broccoli sprouts, that can help.
Curcumin,
Yep, turmeric, all of these, high potency foods that'll help promote these detox pathways to work faster, right?
right.
So